The relationship you have with yourself sets the foundation for every other relationship in your life. Yet, loving yourself often feels like the hardest thing to do. We're taught to care for others, to be humble, and to put everyone else first. But what if I told you that self-love isn't selfish, it's survival? Research shows that self-compassion rewires your brain. It reduces anxiety and depression while building real resilience. This isn't about arrogance or narcissism. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness you would show your best friend when they're struggling. It's about quieting that harsh inner critic that has been in charge for too long. In this audiobook, you'll discover why loving yourself more than anyone else isn't just okay, it's necessary. You'll learn science-backed strategies that turn self-doubt into self-trust and self-criticism into self-celebration. When you truly love yourself, everything changes. Your decisions become clearer. Your boundaries become stronger. Your life becomes yours again. Chapter 1. Understanding what self-love really means. Most people misunderstand self-love from the beginning. When they hear the term, they think of bubble baths, affirmations in the mirror, or posting polished selfies with captions about self-acceptance. But that isn't self-love. That's just showing off. True self-love is quieter, more challenging, and much more powerful than anything you'll find trending online. The confusion runs deep. Our culture has spent years teaching us that caring for ourselves is selfish. It suggests that putting our needs first makes us narcissistic, and that saying no is somehow unkind. We've been led to believe that self-love and selfishness are the same thing. They are not. A narcissist relies completely on outside approval to support their exaggerated self-image. They crave constant praise, admiration, and attention because they face an inner emptiness they can't acknowledge. When pushed, they react defensively or aggressively. They cannot accept being seen as flawed because their self-worth hinges on appearing perfect. Self-love, on the other hand, is based in reality. It means accepting both your strengths and weaknesses honestly. It involves being open to growth, feedback, and change. A person who truly loves themselves doesn't feel the need to prove anything to anyone. They are secure enough to admit mistakes, humble enough to learn from them, and strong enough to set boundaries without feeling guilty. This difference matters more than you think. When you confuse self-love with narcissism, you deny yourself the chance to build a healthy relationship with who you are. You remain small, apologetic, and always seeking approval from everyone except the one person whose opinion should matter most, yourself. So let's be clear, self-love isn't about feeling good all the time. It isn't about toxic positivity or ignoring your problems. It's about creating a stable internal relationship with yourself based on respect, worth, emotional safety, and accountability. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer someone you care about deeply. Consider Sarah. She climbed every ladder available to her. She graduated at the top of her class, landed a prestigious job, married someone society approved of, and had the house, the car, and the vacation photos. From the outside, her life seemed perfect. But inside, she felt empty because none of it was genuinely hers. Every decision she made aimed to earn validation from her parents, colleagues, or social circle. She was living someone else's dream, mistaking external approval for internal worth. When her marriage fell apart and her career stagnated, she faced a terrifying truth. She didn't know who she was. She had never asked herself what she wanted, valued, or what brought her joy. She spent 35 years chasing other people's approval and never once turned inward to ask, what do I need? What do I feel? Who am I when no one's watching? This is what happens when we skip the crucial work of building a relationship with ourselves. We create our lives based on the opinions of others, not realizing we're standing on unstable ground. Your identity formed long before you had any say in it. From the moment you were born, you picked up messages about who you should be. Your parents, culture, schools, and friends handed you scripts about what makes someone valuable, lovable, and worthy. As a child with no alternative understanding, you accepted these scripts as truth. If your parents only praised you for achievements, you learned that your worth relies on your successes. If your feelings were dismissed or belittled, you learned that your emotions didn't matter. If affection was withheld when you made mistakes, you learned that love must be earned through perfection. These patterns become so ingrained that even in adulthood, you carry them unquestioningly. You don't realize you're still performing for approval that will never come. You don't see that you're still trying to prove you're good enough to people who taught you to believe you weren't. Here's what many people don't realize. Emotional neglect doesn't need to involve cruelty. It can occur in loving homes. Your parents may have provided everything you needed physically: food, shelter, education, safety, but if they didn't notice your emotions, validate your feelings, or teach you how to process what was happening inside you, you experienced emotional neglect. That neglect taught you a painful lesson. Your inner world doesn't matter. Children who grow up in emotionally neglectful environments learn to shut off their feelings. They turn into adults who can't articulate what they're experiencing, who feel numb or detached, and who struggle to trust their own judgment. They become people who seek validation everywhere except from themselves. They chase success, relationships, and achievements, hoping that external accomplishments will fill the emptiness inside. But they don't, because that emptiness isn't about what you have. It's about who you are to yourself. Self-love is not a destination you reach after enough therapy sessions or vision boards. It's a practice. It's a daily commitment to honesty, compassion, and responsibility toward your own life. It's choosing to notice your feelings instead of numbing them. It's setting boundaries even when it disappoints others. It's forgiving yourself for being imperfect while still holding yourself accountable for growth. It's recognizing that you don't need anyone else's permission to matter. This is where the work starts. Not in grand statements or dramatic changes, but in small, consistent acts of turning toward yourself with curiosity instead of judgment. It means asking, what do I need right now? And actually listening to the answer. It involves noticing when you are performing for others and choosing to be authentic instead. Understanding that loving yourself doesn't mean you will never feel pain, but it does mean you will stop abandoning yourself in the face of it. You weren't born needing external validation to know your worth. You were taught that. What was taught can also be unlearned. The question is, are you willing to do the work required to build a relationship with yourself that can withstand life's storms? Are you ready to stop giving away your sense of value to people who are never capable of providing it? Chapter 2. Healing the Inner Critic and Emotional Wounds. There's a voice in your head that doesn't belong to you. You hear it every day. It tells you that you're not good enough, smart enough, or attractive enough. It compares you to everyone around you and always finds you lacking. It replays your failures and predicts your future disasters with certainty. You've likely lived with this voice so long that you think it's you, but it isn't. This is your inner critic, and it was formed in you before you had any say in the matter. At some point in your childhood, someone else's disappointment became the message you tell yourself. A parent's frustration, a teacher's dismissal, or a peer's mockery. These judgments took root in your developing mind and shaped how you talk to yourself. The inner critic comes from early relationships where children absorb harsh voices from authority figures, using them as ways to deal with criticism or fear of losing love. What makes the inner critic so harmful is its automatic nature. These critical thoughts usually operate outside your awareness, feeling so normal that you don't see them as attacks. You don't choose to criticize yourself like you might choose to eat breakfast or check your phone. The voice just shows up, uninvited, like background noise you have learned to ignore. But you can't ignore it. It influences every decision you make, every risk you shy away from, and every dream you give up on before it even takes shape. Marcus was a senior consultant at a global firm. By outward standards, he was successful. He had climbed the corporate ladder, earned the promotions, and received accolades. But inside, he was struggling. During a coaching session, his therapist asked him to write down the thoughts that popped into his head after he made a mistake at work. Marcus filled an entire page. "You're incompetent. Everyone knows you're a fraud. You don't deserve this position. They're going to figure out you've been faking it all along." When his therapist asked if he'd ever speak to a colleague that way, Marcus was stunned. "Of course not," he replied. "That would be cruel." The realization hit him hard. He was treating himself with a level of cruelty he would never dream of showing another person. Self-criticism is strongly linked to depression and undermines motivation by causing people to lose faith in themselves. Marcus had spent 20 years thinking that harsh self-talk kept him performing well. He thought without it, he'd become lazy or complacent. What he discovered instead was that his inner critic wasn't protecting him. It was wearing him down. The inner critic doesn't just attack randomly. It uses extreme thinking patterns, black and white judgments, catastrophizing, and blaming yourself for failures while seeing successes as luck or mistakes. It takes one error and turns it into proof of your fundamental inadequacy. It takes one rejection and twists it into evidence that you're unlovable. It sees patterns where none exist and creates stories that keep you small, safe, and fearful of ever being vulnerable again. Here's the paradox. The inner critic first developed as a protective mechanism in childhood, helping kids cope by internalizing blame rather than facing the painful truth that their caregivers were flawed or unable to meet their needs. When you're a child who relies on adults for survival, it feels safer to think, "I'm bad," than to think, "My parents can't protect me." So, your brain creates an internal voice that criticizes you preemptively, hoping that by spotting your mistakes first, you can avoid punishment or rejection. It's a survival strategy. And like most childhood survival strategies, it becomes a prison in adulthood. Research in attachment theory shows that children raised in environments where affection depended on performance often develop harsh inner critics as adults. If love had to be earned through achievements, your brain learned that your worth is always in question. If emotions were dismissed or punished, you learned that feeling anything makes you weak. These patterns don't just fade with time. They harden. They become the way you view every experience, every relationship, and every opportunity. Jenna graduated with honors, secured a competitive internship, and was offered a full-time position before finishing her degree. Everyone told her she was brilliant. Everyone except the voice in her head. That voice told her she had gotten lucky, that she didn't truly deserve any of it, and that eventually people would realize she wasn't as smart as they thought. When her manager praised her work, Jenna immediately shifted focus, highlighting everything she could have done better. When colleagues invited her input, she downplayed her contributions, convinced that her ideas weren't worth sharing. She lived in constant fear of being exposed as a fraud. It took months of therapy for Jenna to see that her inner critic echoed her father's voice, who never praised her accomplishments because he believed it would make her arrogant. His silence taught her that success should never be celebrated, only examined for flaws. She'd spent her entire life trying to earn validation that would never come because she'd internalized the belief that she shouldn't receive it. The psychological principle that can help you break this cycle is self-compassion. Research by psychologist Kristen Neff identifies three main elements: being kind to yourself instead of harshly judging yourself, recognizing that struggle is part of the shared human experience rather than a personal failure, and being mindful of your emotions without over-identifying with them. This isn't about boosting your ego or pretending you're perfect. It's about treating yourself with the same basic kindness you'd offer anyone else who was struggling. Studies show that self-compassion is linked to lower anxiety and depression, improved emotional control, increased resilience, and healthier motivation compared to self-criticism. When you approach your mistakes with compassion instead of condemnation, you don't lose your drive to improve. You gain the emotional safety needed to take risks, to learn, and to grow without the crippling fear of failure. The science behind this is rooted in neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize and form new neural connections throughout life based on consistent practice and focus. Your inner critic exists because certain neural pathways have been strengthened through years of repetition. Every time you criticize yourself, you reinforce those pathways. But the brain doesn't have to stay stuck in those patterns. Through cognitive restructuring, identifying, and challenging unhelpful thought patterns, you can weaken old neural circuits while building new ones that support self-compassion. This isn't a quick fix. Research using brain imaging has shown that cognitive behavioral therapy can physically change brain structure, reducing activity in the amygdala, which processes threats, while strengthening areas related to emotional regulation. But change needs practice. You must catch the critical thoughts as they occur, question their truth, and consciously replace them with more balanced views. Not empty positive affirmations, but genuine assessments that don't distort reality in either direction. When Marcus started practicing self-compassion, he began by noticing the critical voice without simply believing it. When it said, "You're incompetent," he took a moment to ask, "Is that true or is that fear?" He started treating his internal dialogue the same way he would treat a friend being too hard on themselves. He didn't argue or fight the voice. He acknowledged it, thanked it for trying to protect him, and gently reminded himself that he no longer needed that kind of protection. Over time, the volume of the voice decreased. It didn't disappear completely, but it lost its hold on him. He could hear it and choose not to follow it. Healing the inner critic isn't about silencing it completely. It's about changing how you relate to it. It's recognizing that the voice was formed from pain, shaped by fear, and reinforced by years of trying to keep you safe in a world that felt dangerous. It had a purpose once, but you're not that scared child anymore. You have choice now. You can decide, moment by moment, to speak to yourself with honesty and kindness, understanding that being human means being imperfect, and that your imperfection doesn't lessen your worth. The question isn't whether you'll make mistakes or face failure. You will. The question is, who will you be to yourself when that happens? Chapter 3. Boundaries, Worth, and the Courage to Disappoint Others. Rachel collapsed on her kitchen floor at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. She wasn't physically ill. She was completely exhausted. Her body simply gave out after years of saying yes. Yes to extra projects at work. Yes to organizing every family gathering. Yes to volunteering at her kids' school. Yes to friends who needed help moving, a listening ear, or someone to watch their pets. She said yes so often that she stopped noticing, until her body forced her to stop. When the doctor asked what led to her collapse, Rachel started listing everything she had going on. It took 20 minutes. The doctor then asked her an important question. When was the last time you said no to someone? Rachel couldn't remember. She genuinely couldn't think of one instance in recent memory where she refused a request. The realization hit hard. She had spent years trading her peace for acceptance, thinking that being useful meant she was worthy. She believed that if she stopped helping, people would stop loving her. People pleasers learn early that their value comes from meeting others' needs and being overly accommodating. Many never realize they are separate beings with their own needs and preferences. For someone like Rachel, the idea of saying no felt almost impossible and genuinely frightening. The real question behind every request wasn't, "Do I want to do this?" It was, "Will they still like me if I don't?" This issue often arises when you grow up in environments where affection feels conditional. Maybe your parents were too busy or emotionally unavailable, only noticing you when you earned their attention through achievements or helpfulness. You learned that love isn't freely given. It comes from being convenient and agreeable. So you became whatever people needed, calling it kindness. But it wasn't kindness. It was survival. The psychology behind people-pleasing shows it often stems from fears of abandonment and a deep need to belong. Many stuck in patterns of seeking external validation also struggle with depression. The problem grows over time. Without boundaries, you teach others how much they can take from you. Many will take everything you're willing to give without questioning if it's fair or sustainable. Not because they're cruel, but because you never showed them where you end and they begin. Boundaries aren't walls meant to keep people out. They show others how to treat you based on what you accept in your life. When you don't set boundaries, or when your boundaries are so weak that they might as well not exist, people assume they can keep taking. You, exhausted and resentful, continue giving while quietly resenting everyone involved, including yourself. Living without boundaries is costly. It leads to burnout, anxiety, and depression. People pleasers often feel lost and disconnected from who they truly are because they're always focused on what others want them to be. You become a shell of yourself. You lose track of your own preferences, desires, and identity. You exist only in relation to what others need from you. And the relationships you think you're preserving through self-sacrifice, they're not real. They're built on a false foundation, empty, transactional, based entirely on your willingness to disappear. James learned this the hard way. He was the person everyone called when they needed something, whether it was a ride to the airport or help with a resume. He took pride in being dependable and generous, someone people could count on. But when James went through a difficult breakup and reached out for support, most of those same people were suddenly unavailable. They were too busy, too stressed, or unsure of what to say. He realized the support was conditional. He wasn't loved, he was useful. The moment he stopped being useful, he became inconvenient. Relationships built on people-pleasing attract those who may take advantage of your habit to prioritize others, leading to toxic or codependent dynamics. James had spent years giving everything to people who cared only about what he could provide. When he began setting boundaries, saying no to draining requests, asking for reciprocity in friendships, expressing his own needs, some people became angry. They accused him of changing. They told him he wasn't the person they thought he was. And they were right. He had changed. He refused to be that person anymore. Here's the truth nobody wants to admit. The people who get upset when you set boundaries are those who benefited from you having none. Healthy people don't get angry when you protect your peace. They respect it. They adjust. They value you as a complete individual, not just as a resource to be depleted. Setting boundaries requires something most people-pleasers find almost unbearable: the courage to disappoint others. Researcher Brené Brown explains that having the courage to love ourselves means we must be willing to risk disappointing others. This creates a central tension. Every time you face a choice between disappointing someone else and disappointing yourself, you must decide who matters more in that moment. If you've spent your life choosing others, choosing yourself can feel like betrayal. But think about what you're actually betraying when you refuse to set boundaries. You are betraying your own needs, energy, and dignity. You are teaching yourself that everyone else's comfort is more important than your survival. And survival is what's at stake here. Not in a dramatic life or death sense, but in the quiet erosion of self that occurs when you ignore what you need, want, and feel for years. Boundaries are self-respect in action. They show the world and yourself that you matter, that your time has value, that your energy is not limitless, that you are not obligated to sacrifice yourself to keep others comfortable. This doesn't make you selfish. It makes you honest. And honesty is the foundation of any meaningful relationship. When Rachel began practicing boundaries after her collapse, she started small. She stopped volunteering for every committee. She told her family she needed one night a week to herself. She said no to a friend's request to help with another project without giving an explanation or apology. At first, guilt overwhelmed her. She felt like she was letting everyone down. But something unexpected happened. The people who truly cared about her adjusted without complaint. They respected her limits. They even admitted they had been worried about her for years, but didn't know how to bring it up. The people who got angry revealed exactly who they were: individuals who valued what Rachel could do for them more than they valued Rachel herself. Losing those relationships hurt, but keeping them would have cost her everything. Boundaries not only protect your time and energy, but also safeguard your sense of self. They allow you to present yourself in the world as someone with agency, preferences, and limits, someone who exists beyond their usefulness to others. The emotional maturity needed to set and maintain boundaries comes from understanding that you are not responsible for how others feel about your limits. You are only responsible for communicating those limits clearly and following through. When you set a boundary and then fail to enforce it out of guilt or fear, you haven't truly set a boundary. You've made an empty threat. That does not just erode others' respect for you, but your respect for yourself. This is the practice of self-love as courage. It involves choosing environments that respect your peace. It means selecting people who see you as more than a service provider. It means taking on commitments that match your values instead of someone else's expectations. It's uncomfortable. It requires you to accept that some people will be disappointed, maybe even angry. But the alternative, living entirely for others' needs while your own wither away, is unbearable. Loving yourself means building a life where your dignity is non-negotiable, where your worth isn't based on how much you give, but on the simple fact that you exist, where you can disappoint others without feeling shame because you understand that their disappointment does not indicate your failure. It's simply information about their expectations, expectations you are under no obligation to meet. The question is, are you willing to be disliked by those who never really saw you anyway? Are you willing to choose yourself, even when it's uncomfortable? Because that's what boundaries demand, and that's what self-love requires. Chapter 4. Rewriting Self-Identity. From self-doubt to self-trust, you carry stories about yourself that were formed before you could speak. These stories sound like truths, but act as cages. I am not enough. I always fail. I don't deserve happiness. Success isn't meant for people like me. These narratives have gone so deep that you don't challenge them anymore. They've become part of your identity. Once set, identity has a strong hold. It resists change, not because it's true, but because it's familiar. The hardest part about these narratives is how quietly they function. They don't announce themselves. They disguise themselves as objective reality or as simple observations about who you are, but they are not observations. They are interpretations. These are stories you've been telling yourself for so long that the line between story and truth vanished years ago. People who grew up facing criticism often take those harsh outside voices, turning them into the way they see all future experiences. David was 43 when he realized he'd been living according to someone else's judgment throughout his adult life. In 7th grade, his math teacher told him he wasn't a numbers person. Just one sentence, one casual comment from an adult who probably forgot it 5 minutes later. But David remembered. He built his entire identity around that statement. He avoided math-related careers. He felt out of place in financial conversations. When his wife asked him to help with their daughter's homework, he panicked. "I'm not a numbers person" wasn't just a belief. It was who he thought he was. Then one day, his daughter asked him to clarify a problem her teacher couldn't explain well. Out of desperation and love, David tried. He succeeded. His explanation was clearer than the teacher's. His daughter understood right away. David sat there, shocked. He had been capable all along. The only barrier was a narrative he had internalized 30 years earlier from someone who knew nothing about his true potential. These narratives affect not just specific skills or abilities. Forming negative conclusions about yourself from major life events predicts ongoing emotional distress. They shape how you interpret every experience, every chance, every relationship. If your main story is, "I don't deserve happiness," when good things happen, you'll let them slip away. Not consciously, not on purpose, but because your identity has no space for lasting joy. If your narrative says, "I always fail," when you do succeed, you'll attribute it to luck, timing, or anything other than your own ability, because taking responsibility for success would contradict the story you have reinforced for years. The emotional cost of living in these prisons is high. You develop anxiety not from outside threats, but from the constant internal judgment telling you that you're not good enough before you even try. You feel depression not because your life is awful, but because the story you tell yourself is one of hopelessness and unworthiness. You feel trapped not by circumstances, but by the narrative, mistaken for reality. Maya was a successful architect. Her walls were filled with awards. Her projects were featured in magazines. Clients trusted her vision completely. But internally, she felt like a fraud. Each morning, she woke up convinced that today would be the day everyone realized she had no clue what she was doing. She worked twice as hard as her colleagues to make up for what she thought was her basic inadequacy. She accepted impossible deadlines. She stayed late at the office. She never took credit for her ideas and always deflected praise to her team. Her internal narrative, formed in childhood when her accomplishments were never quite good enough for her perfectionist parents, told her she had to prove herself each day. If she ever stopped validating herself, her incompetence would be exposed. Then, she had a breakdown. Her body gave out. She spent 3 months recovering and had to step away from work completely. During that time, her firm not only survived but thrived. Her team executed her ideas. Her projects won awards. And she realized something that changed everything. She'd been driven by a story with no basis in reality. The narrative of inadequacy that had pushed her for years wasn't protecting her. It was damaging her. Rebuilding identity doesn't come from grand revelations. It happens through small, consistent choices that teach your brain a different story is possible. Psychologist Albert Bandura calls this self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to take the necessary actions to achieve certain outcomes. This isn't general confidence. Self-efficacy is specific to tasks and situations. It's vital because beliefs about your abilities shape what you are willing to take on and how much effort you put in when things get tough. Bandura identifies 4 sources that strengthen self-efficacy. The first and most powerful is mastery experience, actual success in doing tasks. Each time you achieve something difficult, you boost your belief in your capability to tackle challenges. The second source is vicarious experience, seeing others succeed, particularly people you see as similar to yourself. Watching someone who struggled like you achieve what you want sends the message that success is possible. The third source is verbal persuasion, encouragement from credible people that you can succeed. The fourth is managing your emotional and physical states. Learning to see nervousness as excitement instead of inadequacy, and recognizing that discomfort during growth is normal, not a sign of failure. Self-efficacy is powerful because it creates a self-reinforcing loop. When you believe you can handle something, you work harder, stay persistent, and see challenges as chances rather than threats. That effort leads to success, which strengthens your belief in your ability, making you more likely to face the next challenge. The cycle builds on itself, but the reverse is true too. When you believe you're incapable, you shy away from challenges, give up quickly when you face difficulties, and see setbacks as proof of your inadequacy. That avoidance guarantees you miss out on experiences that could prove your beliefs wrong. This is why small decisions are crucial. Each time you keep a commitment to yourself, even a small one, you create evidence that you're someone who follows through. Each time you set a boundary and stick to it, you reinforce the belief that your needs matter. Each time you tackle something tough and don't let initial failure stop you, you teach your brain that discomfort isn't dangerous. It's just part of growth. Identity isn't what you think about yourself. Identity is what you consistently show to yourself through action. When Maya returned to work, she made one change. She started saying no, not to everything, just to things that crossed her boundaries or asked her to sacrifice her well-being for others' convenience. At first, it felt terrifying. She thought people would be angry or disappointed, that they would discover she wasn't essential. But something surprising happened. People respected her more. Her team rose to the occasion. Her work improved because she was no longer operating from a place of exhaustion and fear. Gradually, through countless small decisions where she chose self-respect over self-sacrifice, her internal narrative began to change. She stopped pretending to be competent and started trusting it. The transformation wasn't instant. Research shows that reconstructing identity involves slowly shedding an old self and accepting a more stable, positive identity through consistent practice. But Maya learned what everyone who rebuilds their identity eventually discovers. The stories you've been telling yourself aren't facts. They are interpretations, and those interpretations can be rewritten. Self-love at this level isn't a feeling. It's not something you wait to feel before you act. It's a series of steady, often uncomfortable choices where you behave as if you matter, even when every part of your old identity insists you don't. It's choosing to trust yourself when you have no solid proof yet that you can. It's treating yourself with the respect you wish you felt, understanding that respect is built through actions, not given because of beliefs. The question isn't whether you'll feel self-doubt. You will. The real question is, will you let that doubt shape your story, or will you start crafting a new one small decision at a time? Chapter 5. Emotional Independence. Loving without losing yourself. Elena believed love, meant vanishing. For 3 years, she changed herself to fit her partner's needs. When he wanted space, she made herself smaller. When he needed support, she ignored her own issues to focus on his. When he criticized her friends, she quit seeing them. When he questioned her career goals, she downplayed them. She thought love required giving up everything for someone else's happiness. By the end of the relationship, Eleanor didn't recognize herself in the mirror. She lost her interests, friendships, goals, and voice. She gave everything away until there was nothing left but a shadow of who she used to be. This is what occurs when we confuse love with self-neglect. We misinterpret dependency as connection. We think loving someone means losing ourselves. The difference between healthy love and codependency is significant. In codependent relationships, one partner relies too much on the other, while the other partner feels a need to be needed. This creates an uneven relationship where one person gives most of the time without receiving much back. One partner takes on the emotional stability of the other. One person's value becomes dependent on their partner's approval. One person sacrifices their needs, boundaries, and identity to keep the relationship going. Those in codependent relationships often feel they must earn love by helping, fixing, or rescuing others because of childhood trauma or neglect. Healthy love, what psychologists call interdependence, looks very different. In interdependent relationships, both partners retain their identities while supporting each other. Each person's needs and preferences are valued in decisions. Both maintain a strong sense of self while being emotionally connected. Both can depend on each other without losing their independence. They help each other grow without sacrificing their well-being. The relationship improves each person's life instead of consuming it. Consider Michael. He met his partner during a tough time in his life. His career was challenging and he felt lost. His partner became his support. But gradually, that support turned into a burden. Michael stopped making decisions without asking her first. He didn't trust his own judgment. He felt happy when she was happy and devastated when she was upset. His mood, self-worth, and emotional state relied entirely on her feelings. He wasn't in a relationship. He was emotionally dependent. When she needed space for her issues, Michael fell apart. He had given away his sense of stability to someone else. Research shows that emotional dependence stems from an inability to love and care for oneself. It shows up as relying heavily on others for emotional needs. Michael never learned to soothe himself, trust himself, or establish his emotional stability. So he sought that support from his partner, putting an impossible weight on her to be everything for him. His therapist, confidence, purpose, and more. No one can handle that load. No relationship can survive it. The effects of this dynamic affect both partners. Codependency leads to burnout, resentment, and unhappiness as giving becomes one-sided. Loss of boundaries can make someone feel lost and disconnected from their true self. The person doing all the giving eventually feels worn out and unappreciated. The receiver feels suffocated and burdened by someone else's emotions. Both end up stuck in a pattern that benefits neither. In contrast, secure attachment resembles a healthier approach to relationships. People with secure attachment feel comfortable with both closeness and independence, balancing emotional intimacy with maintaining their individuality. They don't need constant reminders that they are loved. They can be open without losing themselves. They trust their partners, but don't rely on them for their self-worth. They handle conflict without making it an emergency or shutting down. They believe they deserve love and trust that their needs will be met. Attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, explains how secure attachments happen when caregivers are consistently sensitive, responsive, and available. This teaches children they are safe to explore the world. Growing up with emotionally available caregivers allows children to understand that relationships are safe. They learn to express their needs and trust that love doesn't mean losing their identity. But inconsistent, unavailable, or conditional caregivers teach them that love must be earned, that their emotions are inconvenient, and that closeness is dangerous. These lessons don't fade in adulthood. They shape every relationship that follows. Here's the paradox. Most don't grasp. Secure dependence fosters a stronger sense of self, encouraging risk-taking, independence, and resilience. The more securely connected people are, the more distinct they can be. When you know someone is reliably there for you, you can pursue your own goals and explore your identity without fear. But when a relationship feels uncertain, when you are always worried about being left, you cling tighter, you become smaller, you lose yourself in the effort to keep the other person close. Sophia learned this after years of needing reassurance. She always needed constant contact in her relationships. She texted throughout the day and needed to know her partner's location and company. Any request for space felt like rejection. Only in therapy did she realize her anxiety stemmed from her relationship with herself, not her partner's. She didn't believe she deserved love, so she sought outside validation to prove her worth. As she built internal, emotional stability, learning to comfort herself in times of anxiety and to trust her own judgment, her neediness lessened. Paradoxically, her relationships improved because she didn't expect one person to fulfill her entire sense of worth. Emotional independence doesn't mean you don't need anyone. It means your sense of self isn't based on someone else's presence, mood, or approval. You can be deeply connected to someone without losing connection to yourself. You bring a whole person to the relationship, not a fragment searching for someone to make them complete. Studies show that securely attached individuals enjoy higher satisfaction, commitment, trust, and more positive feelings than those with anxious or avoidant styles. They are better at managing emotions, resolving conflicts, and maintaining healthy boundaries. And what matters most is this: they can love deeply without sacrificing their identity. When Elena finally rebuilt her life after the end of that relationship, she promised herself never to abandon herself for someone else's comfort again. She started small. She kept her friendships alive, even when dating someone new. She pursued her career goals regardless of whether her partner supported them. She spoke up when something felt off instead of swallowing her discomfort. She learned that love isn't about making yourself smaller. It's about finding someone who appreciates you for who you are. The healthiest relationships are built on interdependence, where both individuals feel secure enough to be vulnerable while keeping their autonomy. Both have their own lives, interests, and goals. Both can rely on each other without becoming dependent. Both feel free to express their needs without fearing rejection. Both recognize that loving each other doesn't mean losing themselves. This is what self-love means in relationships. Not avoiding vulnerability or insisting on total independence, but committing to maintain your sense of self while opening your heart to someone else. When you love yourself deeply, you won't accept relationships that require you to disappear. You won't tolerate dynamics that drain you. You won't confuse emotional entanglement with intimacy. You choose relationships that uplift both individuals instead of depleting one. You create bonds that respect individuality while building something beautiful together. You can love without losing yourself, and that makes all the difference. Chapter 6: Self-Care, Beyond Aesthetics, Stability, Peace, and Mental Health. The wellness industry has convinced many that self-care involves face masks and bubble baths. It's seen as something bought in stores or done on Sundays. Loving yourself has become linked to treating yourself with expensive coffee, new activewear, or posting affirmations in your bathroom. But that's not self-care. That's just retail therapy dressed up as wellness. Real self-care often doesn't look good in photos. It isn't glamorous or easy. It can be uncomfortable and inconvenient. It involves going to therapy when you'd rather pretend everything is fine. It means setting boundaries that could upset others. It's getting enough sleep instead of scrolling through your phone. It's saying no to opportunities that might drain you, even if they look impressive. It's discipline wearing the mask of compassion. Andrew built a company from the ground up. He worked 16-hour days and 7-day weeks without taking vacations. He promised himself he would rest later, after the business was stable, after he met his revenue goals, after he proved he could succeed. Yet the targets kept changing. The finish line kept moving. Andrew kept working. Until one morning, he couldn't get out of bed. Not because he didn't want to, but because his body wouldn't let him. He pushed himself for so long that his nervous system shut down completely. The doctor called it burnout. Andrew saw it as a wake-up call. In the months that followed, Andrew learned that rest isn't laziness. Studies show that good sleep is crucial for physical recovery, mental clarity, and emotional balance. When you're sleep-deprived, your brain struggles to remember, process feelings, and handle stress. Research shows that poor sleep raises cortisol levels, hinders executive function, makes your amygdala more reactive, and limits the hippocampus's ability to form positive memories. Andrew had been operating on just 5 hours of sleep for years, thinking that rest was for people without ambition. He systematically harmed his mental and physical health while calling it hustle. Self-care isn't a luxury. It's the base for everything else. Mental health covers emotional, psychological, and social well-being, and it's more than just not being sick. It's important for overall health and quality of life. You can't be there for your work, relationships, or goals if you're running on empty. Still, the people who need self-care the most are often the ones who resist it the hardest. Consider caregivers. Parents, nurses, therapists, and teachers are people who base their identities on caring for others. Research shows that mental health workers often operate in a culture of one-way caring. They show empathy and compassion for others, but rarely receive it back from clients. They give and give until they have nothing left. Then they wonder why they feel resentful, exhausted, and emotionally numb. Maria worked as a hospice nurse for 20 years. She held patients' hands as they died. She comforted bereaved families. She bore the weight of many people's pain every week, but she never processed it. She never went to therapy or took time off to grieve. She thought self-care was selfish while others were suffering. She believed her job was to absorb everyone else's pain without complaint. Eventually, she reached a point where she felt nothing, no sadness, joy, or love, just numbness, and an emptiness so deep that it frightened her. Maria's therapist introduced her to emotional hygiene, the practice of caring for your emotional health like you would your physical health. Just as you brush your teeth daily to avoid decay and eat healthy to fuel your body, emotional hygiene works the same way. Emotional regulation means identifying and managing your feelings to support your psychological well-being. Without proper regulation, powerful emotions can lead to unhealthy behaviors. Processing feelings regularly prevents them from piling up and overwhelming you. Setting boundaries helps you avoid emotional exhaustion. Allowing yourself to rest helps your nervous system recover. For Maria, that meant journaling after difficult shifts, seeing her own therapist monthly, taking days off without guilt, and practicing mindfulness to stay in touch with her feelings instead of numbing them. These habits weren't luxuries, they were necessities. Research shows that journaling can boost mood and overall well-being. It helps clear your mind, manage stress, explore feelings, and weave experiences into your understanding of yourself. Without these practices, Maria couldn't do her job. Without them, she couldn't function. This is where people go wrong with self-care. It's not selfish indulgence, it's maintenance. Just as sleep hygiene, a balanced diet, and regular exercise build well-being, practices like mindfulness and reflection are equally important. Your body and mind need consistent care to work well. When you neglect that care, when you see rest as laziness, ignore your emotions, or push through fatigue, you don't grow stronger. You slowly break down. Until one day, like Andrew or Maria, you hit a wall and can't keep going. The entrepreneur who finally learned to rest didn't do so because of an inspirational quote. His body forced him to. He started setting strict boundaries around sleep. He scheduled recovery days just like he did meetings. He stopped tying his worth to productivity. Then, something surprising happened. His business improved. He could think more clearly and wasn't making choices from a state of exhaustion and stress. Rest improved his performance in everything he aimed to achieve. Self-care includes important practices everyone knows but often overlooks: keeping regular sleep hours, exercising regularly, eating balanced meals, and staying connected with supportive people. These might not seem glamorous, but they form the foundation of stability. You can't manage your emotions when you're sleep-deprived. You can't cope with stress when you're inactive and eating poorly. You can't connect when you isolate from meaningful relationships. Studies show that emotional regulation gives people healthy ways to handle stress and challenges. Techniques like cognitive reframing, mindfulness, and self-soothing can greatly enhance mental health. These practices aren't extras to add once everything else is done. They're the support that allows you to handle everything else. The quiet professional who chose therapy over silence made that decision because he understood a key truth. You can't think your way out of problems that need emotional processing. Therapy isn't a sign of weakness, it's a skilled intervention. It gives you access to someone trained to help you see patterns you might miss, to process trauma your mind has buried, and to develop skills for managing difficult emotions. Research consistently shows that self-care practices like therapy can help lessen stress, lower the risk of illness, boost energy, reduce anxiety and depression, and enhance overall happiness and relationships. For those who grew up feeling that emotions were burdensome or shameful, therapy represents a bold act of self-care. It's saying, "What I feel matters. My inner experience is valid. I deserve help." That recognition can be life-changing. But self-care goes beyond making it through a crisis. It's also about steady wellness, the daily habits that prevent crises from arising. Mindfulness and meditation build awareness of the present moment and emotional regulation. They help lower anxiety, improve mood, and enhance your ability to cope with stress. This means checking in with yourself during the day, noticing stress before it becomes overwhelming, taking breaks before burning out, asking for help before you collapse, practicing emotional regulation techniques to respond constructively rather than reactively to challenges. Emotional regulation includes mindfulness to stay present without judgment, cognitive reframing to change perspectives, distraction to shift focus from triggers, and self-soothing through calming techniques when you feel distressed. These strategies aren't complicated, but they need consistency, and you must believe that your well-being is important enough to protect. Here's the truth. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't help others if you're neglecting yourself. You can't create a meaningful life if you're always sacrificing your peace, health, and stability for external validation or success. Self-care isn't selfish. It's an essential act of self-preservation. It acknowledges that you're human with needs, limits, and a nervous system that requires rest and recovery to work. Loving yourself means treating your well-being as a priority. It means seeing that caring for yourself isn't punishment, but protection. It means understanding that rest, therapy, emotional processing, and boundaries aren't luxuries for when life slows down. They're tools to navigate life's challenges when things get tough. This is what self-care truly is, not the version marketed in ads, but the kind that keeps you alive, stable, and capable of being present for your life. The version that affirms your worth, not for what you accomplish or who you care for, but simply because you exist, and that existence deserves care. Chapter 7. Becoming your home. When someone truly learns to love themselves, something remarkable happens. It is not the loud claims of self-importance that hide insecurity or the rebellious rejection of all outside input. Instead, a grounded presence emerges, a quiet certainty that needs no validation because it rests on a foundation built from within. Think of the person who once questioned every decision and second-guessed their instincts at every turn. They would lie awake, replaying conversations and looking for mistakes, searching for signs of their inadequacy. Today, they stand steady. They have not achieved perfection or eliminated uncertainty, but they have developed what psychologist Eva Henschke identifies as the three pillars of self-love. Self-contact, which focuses on one's internal world. Self-acceptance, the peace that comes from embracing all parts of oneself. And self-care, the kindness we give ourselves. This change doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It appears in moments of choice when actions align with values without any inner conflict. Research from the University of Wisconsin shows that individuals who genuinely love themselves have what psychologists call a positive self-bias, seeing themselves as more positive than the average person. This is not delusion, but the natural result of treating yourself with the same compassion you would offer to a good friend. The person who once feared being alone now finds peace in their own company. Where silence used to magnify criticism and doubt, it now provides comfort. They have discovered what philosopher Jan Branson describes as compassionate self-reflection, the ability to look at oneself honestly without the defensiveness that comes from a fear of judgment. By becoming your own judge without using self-criticism as a weapon, you allow room for real growth. Living purposefully becomes a natural expression of self-respect, not a burden. A person who lives in line with their core values does not see this as a restriction. They understand what behavioral scientists have long known. Values serve as an internal compass that guides decisions clearly. By identifying what truly matters to you, beyond what society demands or family expects, you simplify your choices. You are no longer torn in different directions by conflicting desires. Self-respect shows in the boundaries you maintain and the standards you uphold, not from being rigid, but from recognizing your inherent worth. As psychotherapist Divya Robin explains, when someone has self-respect, they accept themselves and believe they deserve to belong in the world. This belief changes relationships. You attract what you embody. When you respect yourself, you unconsciously teach others how to treat you, not through demands, but through your example. The restless heart that once raced toward outside validation now becomes clear. This growth does not eliminate desire or ambition. Instead, it sharpens them. You learn to tell the difference between chasing achievements to prove your worth and pursuing goals that resonate with your purpose. Emotional intelligence develops naturally when you practice self-compassion. You recognize your feelings without being controlled by them, and acknowledge struggles without letting them define you. Grace enters the picture not as politeness or social conformity, but as the ability to navigate life's challenges without losing your center. A person who has learned self-love does not crumble when criticized or inflate when praised. They remain steady because their sense of self no longer relies entirely on feedback from outside. Research consistently shows that people with strong self-love are more resilient in facing difficulties, bouncing back faster from setbacks because their foundation remains strong. Purpose becomes clear when self-love helps you see beyond immediate satisfaction. You start asking different questions. Not what will make me feel good now, but what matters enough to risk being hurt for. As author and researcher Mark Manson notes, we need to value something beyond ourselves to find meaning in our lives. This is not about reducing self-love, but expanding it, understanding that real self-love involves the ability to contribute to others. Living this way takes ongoing effort. Self-love is not a destination you reach and abandon, not a box to check off in life. Instead, it is an ongoing relationship, a daily commitment to treat yourself with dignity and kindness. Some days, this feels easy. Other days, old patterns return. and familiar doubts come back. Then, you must choose once again to honor yourself. The beauty lies in this very imperfection. You don't need to love yourself perfectly to love yourself well. You don't need to get rid of all self-doubt to build self-trust. Progress is not smooth. There will be setbacks, times when you compromise your values or boundaries. These are not failures, but chances to practice the self-forgiveness that real self-love requires. What sets apart someone who truly learns self-love is how they respond to these moments. Where they once would have spiraled into self-blame, they now extend understanding. They recognize that being human means being imperfect, that growth requires stumbling, and that compassion toward oneself is a strength, not a weakness. This is not about becoming self-centered or indifferent to others. Recent research shows that healthy self-love creates space for genuine connection. When you are not always seeking outside validation, you are free to engage openly. When you accept your imperfections, you can appreciate others' humanity. When you trust yourself, you can be vulnerable without fear of being destroyed. This closing truth is worth repeating because our culture often overlooks it. Self-love is not narcissism. It does not excuse selfishness or indifference to suffering. True self-love, as seen in both ancient philosophy and modern psychology, lays the groundwork for all other love. You cannot sustainably give what you don't have. The instruction to love your neighbor as yourself assumes you have learned to love yourself. Self-love is a calm kind of strength, not the brittle armor of defensiveness, but the flexible resilience of someone who knows their worth is not open for negotiation. It is a quiet loyalty to yourself, honoring your needs without guilt, setting boundaries without apology, and choosing growth over comfort when it aligns with your values. It is about becoming the home you have always needed, the safe place you return to when the world feels too much, the steady belief that no matter what happens outside, you are enough. You have always been enough, and you will continue to be enough. Not someday when you achieve more or fix all your flaws, but right now, in this imperfect, evolving, beautifully human moment. This is what it looks like when someone truly learns to love themselves. Not a destination, but a direction. Not perfection, but presence. Not the end of the journey, but the realization that the journey itself is home.